Ford recently announced the relocation of Focus, CMAX, and EV production lines overseas, eliminating 2,000 American jobs in a move CEO Jim Farley defended as necessary survival. The company cited increasing costs from tariffs and raw materials like lithium, which saw a 300% price increase between 2020 to 2024 and is 80% refined in China, as making US-based EV production 25% more expensive than foreign alternatives. Ford's struggle against Tesla's integrated business model prompted a $50 billion reinvention called Project T3, featuring partnerships with BMW for solid-state batteries, 90% robot-performed assembly, million-mile EVs with rapid charging, and direct-to-consumer sales channels. Though politicians labeled Ford unpatriotic, Farley's stark question, "Do you want to lose 2,000 jobs now or 20,000 5 years from now?" frames their decision as pragmatic adaptation rather than betrayal. The company is fundamentally transforming by shifting from mechanical assembly to software engineering, from traditional dealerships to online sales, and from human-operated factories to automated production facilities, representing what might be either a blueprint for America's post-oil industrial rebirth or a warning for every legacy company facing technological disruption. Subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of the changing automotive industry and its impact on the American economy. U.S.-China trade tensions. Following President Trump's threat to impose a 50% tariff on Chinese goods, China declared it would fight to the end. With multiple potential countermeasures available, China could increase tariffs on U.S. imports by 10 to 20%, potentially affecting over $100 billion in goods including high-tech products, smartphones, laptops, and electronic components. As China controls 60 to 70% of global rare earth supply materials crucial for high-tech manufacturing, they could restrict exports, creating significant disruption for U.S. technology companies. Additional non-tariff measures might include slowing customs clearance for U.S. goods through tightened safety inspections, particularly for food and pharmaceuticals, which previously caused 10 to 20% of shipments to face delays. China might also devalue the yuan by 5 to 10% against the dollar to maintain export competitiveness. Develop alternative markets through initiatives like Belt and Road, where exports have grown 15 to 20% annually, and leverage diplomatic relationships with ASEAN, Russia, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization members to counter U.S. influence. Canada-U.S. trade dispute. Following controversial remarks by President Trump, including accusations of fentanyl smuggling and subtle land annexation threats, Canada launched significant economic countermeasures against the United States. Canadian tourism to the U.S. plummeted 75 to 80%, with popular destinations like Las Vegas, Florida, and Maine experiencing up to 90% revenue drops, potentially costing the U.S. $9 billion this year alone. Canadians began mass selling their U.S. properties due to fears over social instability, harsh immigration policies, and health concerns including measles outbreaks. Prime Minister Mark Carney imposed $60 billion in retaliatory tariffs targeting U.S.-made automobiles while explaining, "We do that with regret in the sense of we're responding to unjustified, illegal, and misguided tariffs." When Trump imposed tariffs on the Canadian auto industry, 3,600 workers at the Windsor car assembly plant lost their jobs overnight. Illustrating the human cost of these trade decisions, Canada further announced 25% tariffs on all U.S. imported cars violating trade agreements, 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods effective March 2025, and additional tariffs on steel and aluminum products worth $12.6 billion. While being careful not to target auto parts to protect integrated production systems, Canadian citizens began boycotting U.S. products and even booing the U.S. national anthem at sporting events, demonstrating how diplomatic tensions have cascaded into public sentiment. Trump's global tariff plan. President Trump's proposed 20% global tariff on all imports has triggered warnings from economists who describe it as Smoot-Hawley 2.0, referencing the 1930 policy that contributed to the Great Depression. Mark Zandandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, predicts this plan would increase unemployment from the current 4% to over 7%, plunging the economy into recession before collecting any substantial revenue. While tariffs might temporarily increase government income, the resulting economic contraction would significantly reduce income taxes, corporate taxes, and sales taxes while simultaneously increasing government spending on unemployment benefits, SNAP, housing subsidies, and farmer assistance. Mexico, which shares the closest trade relationship with the U.S. supporting 14 million North American jobs, has sent weekly negotiation delegations to Washington. while Canada has activated its emergency response plan, following Trump's Liberation Day announcements celebrating America's supposed trade barrier freedom. Wall Street responded with dropping stocks in capital flight while economists warned about resurrecting protectionist policies that historically damaged the economy. The anticipated increase in import tariffs from below 2% to approximately 8% would return the U.S. to post-World War II era rates, placing significant burdens on American consumers with little evidence of domestic manufacturing benefits. German car tariffs and EU response. President Trump's decision to impose a 25% tariff on imported cars has sparked particularly strong reactions from Germany and the EU, as this policy would increase German vehicle prices by $5,000 to $7,000 each, with the U.S. importing nearly 3 million cars annually from Germany, valued at approximately $35 billion. Premium brands like BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz face significant challenges maintaining their U.S. market positions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz strongly criticized the move, warning of far-reaching consequences for industries worldwide and signaling that Germany views this not merely as an economic dispute but as an assault on long-standing trade values between nations. The EU is preparing comprehensive retaliatory measures, including 30% tariffs on U.S. agricultural products like soybeans, beef, and corn, worth around $12 billion annually, and 20% tariffs affecting U.S. tech giants like Amazon, Apple, and Google. Beyond Germany, other U.S. allies including Canada, Japan, and South Korea have voiced concerns about impacts on their automotive and technology industries, potentially leading these nations to seek alternative trade partners and gradually isolating the U.S. both economically and politically. Domestically, Trump's tariff policies are causing political complications in key states like Florida and Wisconsin, where voter support appears to be weakening and Democratic candidates are making gains, creating pressure within Republican Party ranks. Canada-U.S. tensions. Relations between the U.S. and Canada deteriorated dramatically after Trump shared a New York Post article headlined "Western Canadians Excited to Become the 51st State of the U.S., which interviewed just 3 people, including Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who had previously been implicated in election interference allegations. Trump further inflamed tensions by declaring, "We don't need energy from Canada. We don't need lumber from Canada. We don't need anything from Canada," while paradoxically suggesting annexation of Canadian territory. Within 48 hours of these statements, Canadian flight bookings to the U.S. plunged 70%. Canadian consumers began boycotting American products, and popular tourist destinations like Las Vegas reported pandemic-like emptiness. Canada launched a nationwide Choose Canada campaign with billboards appearing across both countries declaring tariffs equals taxes, Trump's taxes you pay. In a speech in Georgetown, Ontario, Prime Minister Mark Carney directly addressed the situation. "We also have to stand up directly to a man named Donald Trump, a man who wants to break us so America can own us. That is never, ever going to happen," before unveiling a 3-step plan to fight, protect, and build, including constructing 500,000 houses annually and unifying provincial economies into a stronger federal bloc. Impact on American consumers. The implementation of Trump's tariff policies is expected to cause substantial price increases across essential consumer goods, with economists projecting specific impacts: eggs rising by $1.75 per carton, bread by 87 cents per loaf, salmon by $2.75 per pound, and automobiles by $2,000 to $15,000 per vehicle. Low-income families who cannot buy in bulk will be disproportionately affected, with many households facing an additional $1,800 to $3,600 in yearly expenses, forcing increased reliance on credit cards with interest rates exceeding 20%. As raw material prices rise and production costs increase, inflation will spread throughout the economy, decreasing purchasing power and increasing household debt. Experts warn that Trump's tariffs will affect 90% of global trade, triggering retaliatory measures that could lead to supply chain disruptions. Rising costs, threatened dollar value, reduced business investment, and production contractions. Policy inconsistency compounds these economic challenges, as Trump's frequently changing positions, announcing global tariffs one day while potentially waiving them for certain countries the next, prevents businesses from making long-term plans and leaves consumers anxiously anticipating price shocks. Without a coherent long-term strategy for developing domestic manufacturing capacity, Trump's self-proclaimed Liberation Day appears likely to trap Americans in higher prices while pushing the economy toward recession through decreased investment, frozen business activity, and damaged investor confidence. ReTryCloud can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.